So at this great day, when these things shall come to pass, Satan will be raging to try and get the hearts of the children of men, the hearts of the Lord's people, to be angry against that which is true. Again, we have to remember that just like the parable of the 10 virgins in that parable that Jesus gave are about those who were watchful to some degree. So these are active members, these are worshipful members, but half of them in the parable were slothful. Slothful not in every way, because they were waiting for Jesus. So not entirely slothful. It's important to remember that. Important to remember who Nephi's talking to, so we realize that it does apply to us. It does apply to the reader. It applies to the person who would actually be reading this book. In fact, I mentioned a link between 2 Nephi chapter 9. We are going to go there right now real quick and get an idea of some of this. And we're gonna come back to 2 Nephi 9. But in the middle of 2 Nephi 9, Jacob, Nephi's brother, also giving a bunch of woes in this chapter, tries to make sure that the reader doesn't make the mistake of thinking he's talking about those who haven't received the gospel, because they're clearly wicked, unrepentant people. They need to receive the gospel. They need to accept God. They need to accept Joseph Smith, the Book of Mormon, all those things. While that might be true, God holds us accountable for the light we received. So Jacob says, verse 26, this exact same thing. The atonement satisfies demands of justice upon all those who have not the law given to them, and they're delivered from that awful monster, death, hell, the devil, lake of fire and brimstone, which is endless torment. We're going to read those same verbiage in chapter 28. We're going to find that same verbiage here. We're going to come back to it full circle, which is endless torment, and they are restored to God who gave them breath, which is the Holy One of Israel. But next verse 27. But woe unto him that has the law given, in other words, yea, that has all the commandments of God like unto us, and that transgresseth them. Meaning, this sermon and Nephi's sermon is for God's people that have the law, that have received the law, that have covenanted to follow God. So that's what these woes are all about. So here in verse 20 we have, at that day, first class of people, the type of people that will be stirred up to anger against that which is good or that which is true. So there will be truth, like when Nephi declared truth to his brothers, and they took it to be hard because their hearts were hard. So they took it to be hard and they angered against it so they wouldn't receive the truth, and their hearts got even harder. That's one class of people, that's of the Lord's people, so of members of the church. That's one class here. So there's going to be truth that we're going to see, and we'll see more here soon. There's going to be truth that comes out. We know that the earth is going to bring out righteousness and truth, and more truth is going to be revealed. We know that these final days are going to reveal more truth, and members of the church are going to be angry against more truth. We're going to see more of that here later in the chapter. Next class of people, of members of the church. And others will he, the devil, pacify. Think of pacifier. Think of a baby. Think of the lullaby. And others will he pacify and lull them away into carnal security, that they will say, all is well in Zion, yea, Zion prospereth, all is well. It's like a little palindrome. All is well in Zion, yea, Zion prospereth, all is well. And thus the devil cheateth their souls, and leadeth them away carefully down to hell. There's a bunch of stuff in this verse. We already talked about the sleeping idea. It gives this idea of being in darkness, being oblivious, being done so in a low, like lulled, pacified, just like rock-a-bye, fall asleep, nothing's to worry about, everything's fine, everything's a-okay. We can sleep peacefully when we know everything's fine. So this idea, we have to examine and consider what this could mean all is well in Zion, yea, Zion prospereth, all is well. So Zion is a spiritual state that manifests itself temporally, but Zion's a spiritual state. Zion is this relationship between me and God and me and my fellow man, which is right in line with the two great commandments. So everything's fine. My spirituality is fine here. My spirituality between my brothers is fine here. Nothing's to worry about. And notice how it says the devil cheateth their souls. So he lied to them. And he leadeth them away carefully down to hell. So this whole verse carries that sleeping analogy all the way to the end of the verse, because they're still sleeping, brings them down to hell asleep, so that once they wake up, it's too late. They're already in hell, or they're already destroyed. This idea of perishing or being destroyed, or death or hell. So that's class of people number 2 that Nephi's warning against. Number 3 is the next verse, 22. And behold, others he flattereth away, and telleth them, there is no hell. And he saith unto them, I am no devil, for there is none. Again, we have to realize who is Nephi warning. Because if we lie to ourselves, we will say, well, I clearly believe in the devil. I clearly believe in Satan. So this has nothing to do with me. Read on. And we fell into the trap. Because it's more than that. This word flattery. What does flattery have to do with anything? We have to consider that word. What does it mean to flatter somebody? To puff them up, make them seem like they're super awesome. Which is really related to the previous verse, all is well. A lot of these concepts are connected. He's going to flatter them and tell them there's no hell. Well, if we think about the word connections for hell here, we have this idea of perishing or being destroyed temporally in the day of judgment of the Lord, having that sort of justice, that sort of judgment fall upon us. And so that is this idea of hell. So the devil will flatter some, and in some degree somehow make them feel puffed up, this idea of flattered, and help them think that there's no punishment for them because there's nothing wrong, right? Or that there's no punishment coming. There's a couple ways that you could potentially figure that. And the more ways that we examine the possibilities, the more things we're going to have to ask ourselves, and the more questions we ask ourselves, hopefully the more honest we get. And the more honest we get, the more we can approach God with humility and say, God, help me see my sinful ways. Help me see in what ways I'm being wicked and turning my heart away from you, because that's what all of this is about. All of this is about having our hearts and our minds not single to God, but strayed in some way. And Nephi's trying to show how Satan's going to do that. Telleth them there is no hell, so there's no punishment. And that could be for different reasons, like maybe make them think you're just fine, you're doing just fine. Or there isn't actually going to come upon you anything wrong. It'll come upon everybody else. Nothing's going to happen to members of the church. Members of the church have this golden ticket into the millennium through all the tribulations, the sword of justice. And we know that's absolutely not true, because Doctrine and Covenants section 112 flattens that idea right away in plain manner. So if you want to read along with me briefly, otherwise I'll just read it. Section 112 of the Doctrine and Covenants. We'll start in verse, well, there's a lot of this in here, great stuff about this time, but we'll just look at, start at verse 24, and we'll go 25, 26. Verse 24, behold, vengeance cometh speedily upon the inhabitants of the earth. So again, we start thinking, oh yeah, all those wicked people wouldn't accept the gospel. I mean, I'm not saying what you think, I'm saying what I think, or would typically think, or used to think. A day of wrath, a day of burning, a day of desolation. of weeping, of mourning, and of lamentation, and as a whirlwind it shall come upon all the face of the earth, saith the Lord. And here's the kicker, verse 25. And upon my house shall it begin, and from my house shall it go forth, to the rest of the world, saith the Lord. And then if that wasn't clear enough, he will say it in other words. Verse 26, first among you, saith the Lord, so among me, who have professed to know my name, and have not known me, and have blasphemed against me in the midst of my house, saith the Lord. What is he talking about? When have I done this? I've been so good. I've been so righteous, Lord. I've gone to church. I paid my tithing. I did all the things I'm supposed to do. Checklist, 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 checklist. What am I missing? That's the question to ask. And Nephi is trying to give that insight, and Jacob as well.